Hello everyone, welcome to another video. Hope you're all keeping well and thank you for watching my videos. This time we're going to be looking at the Hebden Suspension Bridge. It is believed that the Hebden Suspension Bridge was built after a man named Joseph Slack was drowned when crossing the stepping stones, but this belief seems to be a result of Chinese whispers. The origin of the story may be found in memoirs of Thomas Francis Hammond, published in 1927, when he wrote, "A little before 1885, a person named Joseph Slack was crossing some stepping stones in the river, which were a public right of way across and led to Burnsall and Thorpe. When an extra flood of water came down, I think the result of a thunderstorm up in Dales, caught him and swept him away, and he was drowned." The story was recycled in David Joy's book Hebden, the story of Dales Township, and is now recorded as fact by the Yorkshire Dales National Park and on many other places on the web. However, according to a few websites, there is no such evidence to back up this story, and there is no such account of a drowning in the local press, and the only record of a local Joseph Slack was a Hebden coal miner who actually died in 1869, 15 years before the possibility of having a bridge was mooted. B.J. Harker records in his description of Hebden that a William Fletcher was washed away in 1838, returning from his work in the Thorpe collieries. There is nothing in the records to back this claim, and although there was a William Fletcher on the 1801 muster roll, who was a miner, and there were Fletchers living in Hebden in 1841, so make of that what you will. It is true, however, that the safety issue was a major factor. In January 1883, floods destroyed a greater part of Burnsall Bridge, greatly disrupting communications between Hebden and Burnsall, and the nearest other road bridges were at Grassington and Barden. It was to remain closed until October 1885. Pedestrians could still use the stepping stones when water levels were not too high, but until a temporary wooden structure was installed in Burnsall, they had to go via Linton or Woodhouse to cross the river. There had apparently been a history of people slipping on the stepping stones, and it was feared that the increased traffic would increase the possibility of further accidents. The Craven Herald account of the opening of the suspension bridge reports that one local claims to have known of 4 people who died there, but such hearsay should be taken with a pinch of salt. In 1884, a committee was formed to consider the building of a bridge. It consisted of Reverend Charles Henry Carlyle, rector of Burnsall, who was the driving force behind the project, John Steele Wilkinson, grocer and draper of Burnsall, Thomas Francis Hammond, draper and grocer of Hebden, Ralph Bowdin, merchant of Hebden, John Lupton Hurd, farmer of Hebden, and Thomas Stockdale of Skipton, who was a Hebden landowner. The Reverend Carlyle was elected chairman and secretary, and Thomas Hammond the treasurer. It was soon agreed that the suspension bridge was the best solution. Originally, the committee planned the reusing of wood from a temporary bridge in Burnsall, but the price being asked was too high. There were already 2 suspension bridges crossing a wharf in the neighbourhood: Bland's Bridge at Woodhouse, built by John Bland of Woodhouse Manor, and one at Neverside Hall, which had been built by Hebden's very own blacksmith William Bell. Ding dong. The committee inspected the latter, approved it, and commissioned William Bell to construct and erect a similar structure adjacent to the stepping stones. A public subscription was raised to fund the bridge, largely organised by Reverend Carlyle, with over £80, equivalent to over £10,000 in today's values, being donated. Philanthropy was a characteristic of the culture of Victorian social life, and it was a common way of financing local amenities at the time. Although the Skipton Union Highway Board, the local authority body responsible for the local roads, donated a sizable sum of £15. Included in the subscribers were local worthies such as Sir Matthew Wilson, the MP for Skipton, and absentee landowners such as Duke of Devonshire and Thomas Foster Chamberlain. Many of the non-local contributors would have been absentee landowners, although not all such contributed. The locals appear to have subscribed according to their means and social status. A brief note is given when the subscriber has been identified. Permission to erect the bridge on their land was provided by Robert Proctor of Hetton on the Thorpe side and Joseph Mason of Gargrave on the Hebden side. The construction of the suspension bridge was simple, if a little eccentric. Large blocks were emplaced on either side of the river to serve as the foundations. On these were raised 9-inch high hollow columns with a 31-inch circumference top width and bottomed with 48-inch circumference flanges, 2 on each side to serve as the tower supporting the main cables. There are 6 1-inch bolt holes in the flanges, and these are used to secure the columns to the foundations. The cables passed through the top of the columns and were firmly anchored into the ground at both ends. The cables were wire ropes 11.5 inches in diameter and consisted of 5 strands of 6 wires around a hemp core. Pretty strong, in other words. The desk consisted of timber planks supported on both sides by wires anchored into the ground and hung from the main suspension cables by metal straps to provide a walkway 29 inches wide. The walkway sides were protected with perforated iron sheets topped with a wooden handrail painted red. To prevent excessive movement, the centre of the deck was additionally supported by 2 more cast iron columns, one mounted on the other, the lower of which was embedded in the river and filled with concrete. Despite this, the bridge swayed alarmingly and soon became known by the locals as the Swing Bridge. The span of the bridge is 139 inches, otherwise known as 43.2 metres between the columns. The wire rope was purchased from Hebden Mining Company, which had used such material extensively in their Bolton Gill mines. These, however, are closed down, and the company's one remaining venture at the time was driving the Hebden horse level in the village. £4 were paid for 262 yards. Other items of expenditure included cement and bolts for the foundations for securing the columns, £22, which was 14 shillings and 8d in them days, and 4 large knobs costing £1, clean minds please, which topped the main columns, probably ornamental. What is not known for sure is the source of the cast iron columns, probably the most expensive element of the construction, which are not specifically itemised in the accounts. Must be a fiddle. 6 were used, 4 to support the cables and 2 to stabilise the deck. At one stage it was thought that they might have originally supported the power cables across the Bolton horse side, but Peter Hodge determined that the bolts in the foundations of the power cable didn't match the holes in the pillar flanges. Moreover, the Hebden Mining Company, to whom they would have belonged, was still going at the time, and it is likely that they would have charged for the pillars as they did for the wire rope. 3 clues point to the possibility that they were part of the redundant mining infrastructure from one of the Duke of Devonshire's mining interests, possibly Grassington Moor, where they could have been served as water pipes. Firstly, Thomas Hammond thanks James Ray Eddy and Duke's mineral agent during the opening ceremony for providing iron at a cheap rate, also known as mates rates these days. Although James Eddy lived in Carlton, he also owned a lot of land around Hull Bottom at the time. Secondly, the construction costs include an item of 6 guineas being paid to the Duke of Devonshire, and this may have been a nominal guinea per column, hence the cheap rate. Thirdly, Edward Waddilove, lovely name, was paid over £6 for cartage during the build. This was a relatively large amount, but could have been accounted for by the cost of transporting the heavy columns some distance. The mines at Grassington Moor had closed in 1879, and any valuable infrastructure was salvaged. A photograph held by the Northern Mines Research Society taken in the early 1880s shows similar pipes lying on the ground where the headframe of the new moss pit was being dismantled. So one can pretty much be confident that the pillars were recycled, water pipes retrieved from the Grassington Moor mining ground. In November 1923, the bridge was badly damaged by floods. According to Mr. A. Rodwell's report to the Skipton Rural District Council, the river wharf reached such a height at Hebden that one tree had come down, caught the flooring of the suspension bridge and knocked it off the central pillar, and one of the main ropes under the footboards was broken in two. It must have been repaired because in 1928 there was a report that it was in an unsafe condition, and in July 1929 a wire snapped and it was closed again. However, as the responsibility for the bridge was to pass to the West Riding Council on the 1st of April 1930, the District Council simply forwarded their suggestions to them. Note to do with us, fix it yourself. Responsibility for the Hebden Suspension Bridge was transferred to the Yorkshire Dales National Park Authority on its designation in 1954. From the West Riding County Council, the bridge underwent a complete refurbishment in 2014 and 2015, partly funded by a £2,000 donation by Eileen King in memory of her partner Roy. The work included replacing a number of decking boards and handrails and repairing, restoring and painting the metalwork. So there we go, folks. I hope you enjoyed that rather long story about the Hebden Suspension Bridge. So was the story of the drowning man true or not? I'll leave that for you to decide. Pop it in the comments. Happy to be corrected. It's just what I've researched on a couple of local sites. So until the next video, please take care of yourselves. Remember to like, share and subscribe, and goodbye for now.